My daughter-in-law called me a janitor when I was wiping down a table at the resort, and her exact words were, "We don't tip people who clean for a living." She laughed. My son laughed too. Just a little, just enough. They thought I was a retired bus driver picking up weekend shifts to make ends meet. Then I looked her in the eye and told her this resort, every acre of it, belonged to me. What happened in the 40 minutes that followed cost them a wedding present worth more than their house. Before I get into it, do me a favor and hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know who's hearing this. The lobby of the Cedar Hollow Lodge always smelled like pine and old leather in October. I knew that smell better than I knew my own kitchen. 41 years I'd been walking through those doors, first as a busboy at 16, then as a line cook, then as a shift manager, and finally, 26 years ago, as the man who signed the deed. I was wiping down a window table near the fireplace because that's what I do. I don't sit in an office. I never have. The girls at the front desk know me as the old guy in the flannel shirt who fills the coffee pot when it gets low. Most of them, the new ones, don't know I sign their checks. That's how I wanted it. My son had called me Tuesday night. He said he and his wife wanted to come up for the weekend, that they'd been arguing, that maybe a little family time would help. I'd said yes before he finished the sentence. I always said yes to him. His mother passed 11 years ago, and since then I'd been chasing him, the way you chase a cat that doesn't want to be held. He'd come for Thanksgiving sometimes. He'd call on my birthday, but to invite himself? To want to come up to the lodge with me? I almost cried when I hung up the phone. I'd already made up my mind that weekend would be the one. The papers were in the safe in my office upstairs. A trust, drawn up clean, that would put the lodge and a surrounding 160 acres in his name when I was gone, plus a separate fund, $200,000, set aside for any grandchildren they might give me. I had no grandchildren yet. I was hopeful. They pulled in around 11 on Saturday morning in a leased BMW that had a dent in the rear bumper she didn't know I noticed. She got out first, my daughter-in-law. I'll call her that because using her name doesn't matter anymore. She was wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my truck and sunglasses she didn't need because the day was overcast. She looked at the lodge the way some people look at a gas station bathroom. "This is it?" she said. My son got out of the driver's side and gave me a hug that lasted about a second and a half. He's a good-looking kid, my son. Takes after his mother. He works in commercial real estate down the city, and he's the kind of person who tells you about his job in numbers, never stories. "Hey, Pop," he said. I hadn't been called Pop in a long time. He used to call me Daddy when he was small, and then Dad, and then for about 10 years after his mother died, he didn't really call me anything. He'd start sentences with, "Hey," and let them trail. I noticed Pop. I held on to it. "Come on inside," I said. "I had them set up the corner room for you. It's got the view of the lake." My daughter-in-law looked up at the lodge again. I'd had the cedar siding replaced 2 summers ago. The trim was fresh. The porch had 8 rocking chairs lined up like soldiers, and the pumpkins on the steps were the real kind, from the farm 5 miles down the road, not the plastic ones from the box store. "It's cute," she said, in a rustic kind of way. Cute is a word people use when they want you to know they're being generous. I kept smiling. I carried her bag up to the room myself. She didn't offer to take it, and my son didn't either. The bag was heavy, leather, with a little metal tag that had her initials on it. I set it on the luggage rack and turned to leave. "Could you turn the heat up?" she said. "It's freezing in here." I went and turned the dial. It was 68. I turned it to 72 and didn't say anything. "Lunch is at 12:30 in the dining room," I told my son. "Take her around the property if you want. The trail down to the dock is real pretty this time of year." He nodded without looking up from his phone. I went back downstairs. Now, you have to understand something about Cedar Hollow. It isn't fancy. Not in the way these mountain resorts have gotten fancy in the last 15 years, with their cold plunge pools and their $40 mushroom toast. It's an old lodge with 38 rooms, a stone fireplace you could roast a deer in, and a kitchen that puts out food you'd want your grandmother to make. We do well. We do real well, actually. The books are healthy. We've been booked solid every fall weekend for 12 years running. But to look at me, or to look at the place, you wouldn't think money. You'd think nice. You'd think comfortable. That's how I built it, and that's how I want it to stay. She came down at 12:20, alone. My son was on a call somewhere in the parking lot. She stood in the dining room doorway and surveyed the place like she was looking for something to disapprove of. I was at table 7, the round one near the fireplace, refilling the salt and pepper shakers. I do that on Saturdays. I like to. It puts my hands on the dishes and the linens and the silver, and reminds me what we are. She walked over. "Excuse me," she said. I looked up. "My father-in-law owns this place," she said. She said it the way you'd tell a flight attendant you were a frequent flyer. "Could you get me a glass of white wine? Something dry. And not the cheap stuff, please." I straightened up slowly. I had a rag in my left hand and a salt cellar in my right. "Of course, ma'am," I said. I walked over to the bar. Marcy was working it. Marcy had been with us 19 years. I caught her eye, and I shook my head once, very small, when she opened her mouth to say good morning to me by name. She closed it. Marcy is sharp. "Glass of the Sancerre, please," I said. For the lady at table 7, she poured it. She handed it to me. Her eyes were dancing. I carried it over and set it down in front of my daughter-in-law. She didn't look up. She was scrolling her phone. "Anything else, ma'am?" "No," she said. Then as I turned to leave, "Wait, actually." She finally looked at me. "Could you wipe this table? There's a smudge." There wasn't a smudge. There wasn't a smudge. The table was spotless. I'd wiped it myself an hour earlier. Right away. I took my rag and I wiped the part of the table she pointed at. She watched me do it. There was a small smile playing around her mouth, the smile of somebody who has decided that the world is exactly the size she thinks it is. "Thank you," she said. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a $5 bill and held it out to me. I looked at it. "That's all right, ma'am. The lodge takes care of us." "Take it," she said. "I'm sure you can use it." I took the 5. My son walked in then. He came over to the table and sat down across from her, and she immediately pivoted her phone toward him. "Babe, look. The plumber down the street from us is asking $300 just to look at the disposal." $300 to look. "That's robbery," my son said. "That's why I always say, people like that, they prey on you. They see a nice house, they see a young couple, they think jackpot." She gestured loosely in my direction. I was still standing by the table, not 3 feet away, the $5 bill folded in my palm. "This gentleman just wiped my table," she said. "I tipped him 5. That's how it should work. Honest work, honest pay. Not $300 to stand in a kitchen for 15 minutes. My son glanced at me. There was a flicker, a small one, where I think he almost recognized that something was wrong. He looked at me a second longer than a stranger should have, but then his eyes slid past, the way eyes do when they don't want to land on something inconvenient. "What's your dad doing?" she said. "He's around, he'll come find us. He runs this place, right? Or, like, runs it for somebody?" My son shrugged. "He's been here forever. I just want to know what we're walking into." "He's going to give you the trust talk again, isn't he?" "Probably." "You know what I think?" She lowered her voice, but only a little, only enough that she could pretend she was lowering it. "I think we should be polite, take whatever it is, and then sell. He's not getting any younger. He's, 63? 66. Whatever. The point is, we don't want a lodge. We want the cash. The whole rustic cabin thing? Not us. So we smile, we say thank you, and the day it's ours, we list it." I stood there. I was holding her $5 bill. The fire in the fireplace popped, loud, and she didn't even flinch. People who don't know fires startle them. People who grew up with them, they don't even hear it. I turned and walked away. I went into the kitchen. I went past the line, past the walk-in, into the little office I keep behind the dry storage. I closed the door. I stood there with my back against it, and I looked at the $5 bill in my hand, and I made myself breathe. I'd been called a lot of things in 41 years in this business. I'd been called slow. I'd been called expensive. I'd been called a son of a bitch by a man I'd refused to serve more whiskey to in 1994. None of those things had ever sat in my chest the way that $5 bill did. I sat down at my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out the folder. The trust was 16 pages. My lawyer, who's been my lawyer since 1991, had drawn it up the way I asked. Cedar Hollow Lodge, LLC. All real property, all furnishings, all accounts associated, transferred upon my death to my son. The $200,000 education fund for grandchildren. A small clause specifying that the property could not be sold for 10 years following transfer, just to keep it in the family long enough that nobody could undo what I'd built in a fit of greed. I'd asked for that clause. My lawyer had asked me 3 times if I really wanted it. I'd said yes, because I trusted my son. I was going to give it to him that night. After dinner. By the fire. I sat there a long time with that folder in my hands. Then I put it back in the drawer. I closed the drawer. I got up. There was something else I wanted to check first. The lodge has cameras. We installed them 8 years ago after a guest accused one of my housekeepers of stealing a watch. The watch was found 2 days later in the guest's own rolling bag. But by then, the housekeeper had cried in my office, and I had decided that was never going to happen again. There are cameras in every public hallway, in the dining room, at the bar, by the front desk, and outside on the porch. There are no cameras in guest rooms, because that's not who I am. But the dining room, yes, audio too. We had a problem 6 years ago with a man who stiffed his bill and then tried to claim he'd paid in cash. The audio settled it. I went back through the kitchen, out a side door, and up the back stairs to the second-floor office where the security system lives. I sat down at the monitor. I scrolled the dining room camera back to 12:30. I watched her order the wine. I watched her hand me the 5. I watched my son sit down. I turned the audio up. I listened to her say it again. The whole rustic cabin thing? Not us. So we smile, we say thank you, and the day it's ours, we list it. I listened to my son say nothing. I exported the clip onto a flash drive. I do this myself. I'm not as old as people think. Then I sat there for 10 more minutes with my hands folded on the desk. Here's what I want you to understand. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past angry already, sometime between the office and the security room. What I was clear. I was the clearest I'd been in maybe 10 years, because there are moments in your life when somebody tells you the truth without meaning to, and once you've heard it, you can never go back. She had told me what she thought of me, and what my son had agreed to in maybe 90 seconds in the dining room of my own lodge while I held a rag. I went down to the front desk. Renata was on. I'd hired Renata in 2009. She has 3 kids and a husband who does HVAC. Renata, I said, can you do me a favor and ask Marcy and Bill to meet me in the small dining room in 15 minutes and see if Charles is on the property? If he is, ask him to come too. Sure thing, boss. And Renata, I'd like you to come too. She tilted her head. Me? You? She nodded. I walked back to the main dining room. My son and his wife were eating. They had ordered the soup and the bread and a Cobb salad to share. I walked to a different table, table 4, 2 over from theirs, and I sat down. I had a notebook with me. I opened it. I clicked my pen. She glanced at me. She did a small double take. Then she leaned over to my son. That's the busser, she whispered, not quietly enough. Why is he sitting down? Maybe he's on break. With a notebook? Maybe he's writing his memoir, my son said, and they both laughed. I let them eat. I was patient. I waited until the bread was gone and the salad was halfway through. Then I stood up and walked over. Excuse me, I said. I wonder if I could borrow you both for about 20 minutes. There's something in the small dining room I'd like to discuss with you. My son looked surprised. Pop? Hi, son. My daughter-in-law's face went through about 4 changes in 3 seconds. Confusion, then the start of recognition, then a kind of hardening, like she decided to commit to her version of reality no matter what evidence walked through the door. "You work here?" she said. "I do. My husband's father is going to be meeting with us. He owns this place." "I'm aware of who's meeting with you." She picked up her wine glass. Her hand was not perfectly steady. "Well then, we'll see you in there, I guess." "You will." I walked away. The small dining room is a private space we use for rehearsal dinners and corporate retreats. It seats 16 at a long table. There's a fireplace there too, smaller, and a sideboard where I'd asked Renata to set out coffee and water. By the time my son and his wife came in, Marcy was already seated, and Bill, my general manager who's been with me 22 years, and Charles, who was my lawyer and who happened to be on the property because he has a cabin half a mile from the lodge and comes up most weekends, and Renata, my daughter-in-law, stopped in the doorway. "What is this?" "Have a seat," I said, "please." My son sat down slowly. He kept looking at me, then at Charles, then back at me. Charles has white hair and a navy blazer, and he carries a leather portfolio. Charles does not look like a man who works at a lodge. "Pop," my son said, "what's going on?" "I'm going to tell you a few things," I said. "I'd like you to listen." I walked to the head of the table. I did not sit down. I'd had Renata bring up the laptop from the security office. She'd set it on the sideboard. "My name," I said, "is on the deed of this property. I bought it from the Whitestone family in October of 1999. I paid $1.6 million for it. We did $3 million in revenue last year, and we are debt-free. I employ 31 people year-round and another 19 seasonally." My daughter-in-law's wine glass hit the table a little too hard. "What?" "I built this," I said. "I am still building it. I wear flannel because it's comfortable. I wipe tables because I like to. I drive a 2014 truck because it runs. I live in the house up the hill that my wife and I bought in 1986, and I have no plans to ever leave it. Every dollar that comes through the door of this lodge has my name on it. Every employee in this building knows my face. The girls at the front desk call me boss because that is what I am." She was opening and closing her mouth. My son was completely still. "Pop," he said, "I don't understand." "You will." I walked to the sideboard. I turned the laptop so the screen faced the table. I clicked play. The audio came up clear. The camera angle was high but framed both their faces. "I just want to know what we're walking into. He's going to give you the trust talk again, isn't he?" "Probably." "You know what I think? I think we should be polite, take whatever it is, and then sell." My son's color drained. He's not getting any younger. He's, what, 63? 66. Whatever. The point is, we don't want a lodge. We want the cash. The whole rustic cabin thing? Not us. So we smile, we say thank you, and the day it's ours, we list it. I clicked stop. The room was so quiet you could hear the fire ticking. My daughter-in-law went red, then white, then red again. She turned to my son. "He recorded us. That's illegal. Tell him that's illegal." Charles cleared his throat. "Single-party consent state, ma'am. The property is privately owned. The dining room is monitored, and there's signage at every entrance disclosing it. We signed a guest registration card this morning that includes acknowledgement of the recording policy. It's also a publicly accessible commercial space. So even without all that, your expectation of privacy in a hotel dining room is what we lawyers would call thin." She turned on him. "Who are you?" "I'm his attorney." "Of course you are." She stood up. She sat down. She stood up again. My son had not moved. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me at his mother's funeral 11 years ago, when the priest had asked him to say a few words, and he'd realized he had nothing prepared. Lost. Just lost. "Pop," he said, "let me finish." I went to the head of the table. I sat down then. I wanted them to see my eyes. "I had something for you tonight," I said. "I was going to give it to you after dinner, by the fire in the main room, because that was your mother's favorite spot in the lodge, and I thought she'd have wanted to be there for it." He swallowed. "In my office, in a folder, there is a trust. It transfers Cedar Hollow Lodge, all of it, the buildings, the land, the business, the brand, the works, to you, Upon my death, there's also a fund of $200,000 set aside for any children you and your wife might have for their education. She made a small sound, not quite a word. That trust, I said, is not going to be signed. He closed his eyes. No, no, she said. Wait. We can talk about this. That was a private conversation. I was venting. People say things. You can't just... I'm not finished. She closed her mouth. I built this lodge with your mother, I said to my son. She picked the curtains in the rooms upstairs. She picked the apple butter we sell at the front desk from her cousin's farm in Pennsylvania. The cookbook we sell in the gift shop is her recipes and her pictures in front of it. When I walk down to the dock, I am walking the path she walked every morning before she got sick. This place is her, son. I was going to hand you a piece of your mother. And what your wife just told me and what you sat there and let her tell you is that the two of you were planning to put it on the market and split the cash. He was crying. I had not seen him cry since the funeral. I didn't agree with her, Pomp. You didn't disagree either. He had no answer. I turned to her. $5, I said. You handed me $5, and you said you were sure I could use it. I didn't know. I am aware you didn't know. The not knowing is the problem. You treated a man you thought was a janitor exactly the way you wanted to treat him. The fact that he turned out to be your father-in-law is just a piece of bad luck for you. It doesn't change what you are. I didn't mean you meant every word. I stood up. I went to my jacket, hanging on the back of a chair by the door, and I took the $5 bill out of the inside pocket. I walked back. I set it on the table in front of her. That's yours back. The lodge takes care of me. She looked at the bill like it was burning. Charles, I said, would you walk them through the next steps? Charles opened his portfolio. Here's where we are, he said. The trust your father-in-law described will be revised. The lodge will pass into a charitable foundation upon his death, with a board he is currently selecting, dedicated to scholarships for children of resort and hospitality workers in this county. Any remaining personal assets will be designated through a separate instrument. As of this morning, neither you, sir, nor your wife are named as beneficiaries of any portion of the estate. My son made a small sound. In addition, Charles said, your father-in-law has also asked me to prepare a letter regarding a separate matter, the $40,000 payment towards your law school loans in 2018, the $18,000 towards your wedding in 2020, and the $60,000 toward the down payment on your home in 2022. These were structured as gifts at the time, and they remain gifts. He is not going to claw them back. He wanted me to tell you that personally. My son looked up. He also wants you to know, Charles said, that he loves you. I looked down at the table. That part I'd like to say myself, I said. Charles closed his portfolio. I looked at my son. I really looked at him. I saw his mother's nose. I saw the 8-year-old who used to ride on my shoulders down the dock. I saw the 17-year-old who'd cried in the truck the night his prom date stood him up. I saw all of him. Son, I said, I love you. I have loved you every day of your life. I will love you tomorrow and the day after that, but I will not hand a place your mother built to a woman who plans to sell it before I'm cold, and I will not hand it to a man who will let her. If you become someone different, if you make different choices, my door is open. My phone works. I will pick up. But I am not handing you Cedar Hollow, not now, maybe not ever. He could not speak. She could. This is insane. This is insane. You are throwing your son out over a conversation. Over $5. Do you hear yourself? I did not look at her. Bill, I said. Marcy, Renata, thank you. You can go back to the floor. They got up quietly. Marcy squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Charles, I said, stay a minute, would you? Of course. I turned to my son and his wife. I'd like you to gather your things and check out. The room is on the house. So's the lunch. There's no charge. She tried one more time. If we apologize, you're not sorry. You're caught. There's a difference. and I've been in this business long enough to tell them apart. My son stood up. He looked like a man who had walked into the wrong room and didn't know how to walk out. "Pop," he said, Can we talk, just us?" I looked at him. I looked at her. She was watching him very carefully. "I'll write you a letter," I said. "It'll come in the next week or so. You can write me back, or not. But if you write me back, son, write me back without her looking over your shoulder. Write me back as the boy I raised. I'd like to hear from him." He nodded slowly, twice. They left. I stayed at the table. Charles stayed with me. Neither of us said anything for a while. Outside, the afternoon was getting on, and the light through the windows was turning the color of weak tea. "That was a hard thing," Charles said finally. "It was." "You all right?" "I will be." He stood up. He gathered his portfolio. He paused by my chair. "You did right," he said. "I want you to know that. I know." He left. I sat there a long time. The fire burned down to embers. Renata came in once, quietly, and refilled my coffee and went out without saying anything, which is one of the reasons I've kept her on the front desk for 16 years. When the sun started to go down, I got up. I walked out of the small dining room, through the main dining room, where the dinner crew was setting up for the 7 o'clock seating. I walked through the lobby. I walked out the front door, down the porch steps, across the gravel drive, and onto the path that goes down to the dock. The lake was flat. Late October, no wind. The water was the color of slate. I sat on the bench at the end of the dock. The bench has my wife's name carved into it, on the underside of the seat. I put my hand on the wood, and I sat there and I talked to her for a while. I told her what had happened. I told her I was sorry, that I'd thought I could give it to him clean, that I'd waited too long, and now there was a woman in his life who saw our place as a number. I told her I'd done the only thing I could see to do. I told her I missed her. The lake didn't say anything back. The lake never does. But the light on the water did the thing it does in the fall, where for about 10 minutes right before the sun drops behind the ridge, everything goes gold. The dock, the trees, my hands on my knees, all of it gold. I stayed until the gold went out and the gray came back. Then I walked up to the lodge. There was a young couple on the porch when I came up the steps, sitting in 2 of the rocking chairs, with a baby asleep in a carrier between them. They had a look on their faces. I knew. The lodge does that to people the first time. Makes them quiet. Makes them tired in a good way. The woman saw me coming and smiled. "Beautiful place," she said. "Thank you. You work here?" "I do," I said. 41 years. That's incredible." I held the door for them. They went inside. The baby still sleeping. The husband mouthed, "Thank you," over his shoulder. I followed them in. The fire was high in the main fireplace. Somebody had put on the soft jazz I like for Saturday evenings. The smell of pine and old leather. The hum of voices in the dining room. Plates clinking. Somebody laughing. I went to the front desk. Renata looked up. "They checked out, boss." "All right." He didn't say much. She said a lot. "Sounds about right. You okay?" "I will be, Renata. Thank you." I went into the kitchen. The line was deep into prep. Tony, my chef, was breaking down a rack of lamb and arguing with one of the line cooks about a sauce. He looked up when I walked in and lifted his chin at me. "You eating tonight, boss?" "I am." "Special's the lamb. I'll have the lamb." I sat at the chef's counter, on the stool I always sit on, the one with the worn leather seat. Tony slid me a plate of bread and butter and went back to his lamb. I ate the bread. I thought about my wife. I thought about my son. I thought about the letter I was going to write him. I was not going to write it that night. I would write it Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. I'd give it some time. I'd let myself feel everything I was feeling, and then, when the feeling settled, I'd write. The letter would say I loved him. It would say I wasn't ready to hand him the lodge yet, and might never be, but that didn't change the shape of my heart. It would say if he wanted to come up for a weekend, alone, no phone, no wife, just him and me in the lake. I would clear my schedule and meet him on the porch. I didn't know if he would come. I thought he might. I sat at that counter and ate my lamb and watched my kitchen do its work, and I felt for the first time all day the smallest edge of peace, not happiness. I wasn't going to feel happiness for a while, but peace. The way you feel peace after you've set a heavy thing down because it was finally too heavy to carry. If you've been treated like you're worth less than you are by somebody who should know better, I want you to hear me. You don't have to yell. You don't have to break anything. You don't have to give a speech. You just have to know who you are and stand in it, and let the people who don't see you walk on past. The right people will stop. The wrong ones will keep walking, and that's how you'll know. If this story sat with you, hit subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments. And stick around, because there's another one coming Friday, and it's about a sister-in-law who tried to charge me rent in the house I bought my mother in 1979. You'll want to hear that one. I've thought about that Saturday 1,000 times since it happened, and what stays with me isn't the $5 bill, or the audio clip, or even the look on my son's face when Charles closed his portfolio. What stays with me is how small a thing it was that revealed everything. A white table, a cheap glass of wine, 90 seconds of conversation in a dining room where the speakers thought nobody who mattered was listening. That's how character works, in my experience. It doesn't show up in the big moments. The big moments people prepare for. They rehearse a face for the funeral, a tone for the wedding, the right words for the job interview. Where they slip is in the small rooms with the people they think don't count. My daughter-in-law didn't humiliate me on stage. She did it to a man she thought wiped tables for a living. That's what told me who she was. And my son, sitting next to her, saying nothing. That's what told me who he had become. I want you to understand something, and I want you to understand it whether you're 16 or 60. The way you treat the person who cleans your hotel room, who pours your coffee, who carries your bag, who fixes your sink, that is who you actually are. Not the version you put on for your boss, not the version you put on for your future in-laws. The version that comes out when you think there's no consequence is the real one. And there is always a consequence, because the world is bigger and more connected than any of us realize. The man wiping the table might own the building. The woman taking your order might be on the board of the hospital where you'll need a favor in 15 years. The kid bagging your groceries might be your daughter's husband someday. I didn't pull that trust to punish them. I pulled it because I finally saw clearly. My wife didn't build this place so I could hand it to somebody who'd list it the week after my funeral. She built it for the same reason I keep wiping tables at 66, because the work itself is dignity, and dignity is not something you can sell. If you're young, build a name people are glad to say. If you're middle-aged, look hard at who you've become, and ask whether the 8-year-old you used to be would recognize you. And if you're old like me, don't be afraid to draw a line, even with your own. Love is not the same as approval. I love my son. I will love him until they put me in the ground next to his mother. But I will not lie to him by pretending what he let happen at that table was all right. The kindest thing I could do for him, the truest thing, was tell him the truth and let him sit with it. Effort, decency, and the courage to be honest with the people you love. That's the whole thing. That's all I've got after 66 years.